Hello and welcome to the Sunderland Echoes Raw podcast. With me, Rich Veneer, standing in briefly. James Copley and Phil Smith. How are you doing both?
Good, thanks. My first wave of nervous nausea this morning, but excitement as well.
Amongst the Wembley fever.
Yeah, it was a good end last week, wasn't it? In the aftermath of the dramatic Coventry win, but yeah, the nerves started to dangle a little bit as the week goes on. Plenty to chat through then ahead of the final on Saturday at Wembley against Sheffield United, with a place in the Premier League at stake for the winner. Let's just kick off then with just some brief reflections then on last week at Coventry and how you think things will pan out, Phil, in terms of like team news and some of the team selections. I know you've done a piece on the Echo website today, some of the big decisions facing Regis Le Bris. Do you think he'll veer away too much from the team and approach of last week, or stick with it?
I think it's a really, really interesting one. I guess obviously the first question really is whether he sticks with the 4-4-2 that he obviously used in both games against Coventry. And obviously any Sunderland fans listening will remember that probably the best Sunderland have ever looked in that 4-4-2 shape was against Sheffield United at the Stadium Light at the start of this year when they won and they were probably the better team. But I think the feeling probably coming away, especially from that second leg, when obviously one of the best moments of Stadium Light history, but when Sunderland probably hadn't performed that great, certainly in the 90 minutes, was that it's probably most likely they'll go back to a 4-3-3. I think the big one really is whether Romain Mundle's fit to start. I think if Romain Mundle's fit to start, I think he has to start because he's so important. And then that obviously shifts Enzo Lefebvre into the kind of number 10 role, which is something that we haven't seen much of, but is obviously his best position and probably gives him the best chance of impacting that final. So, yeah, it's going to be really interesting. You can never rule him out and going with the two strikers, but I feel like a lot of it is going to stem from whether he deems Mundle fit to start. Because if he does, I think a lot of the kind of other pieces of the jigsaw then fall into place pretty easily off the back of that, I think.
Do you agree with that, James?
Yeah, I think so. I think we mentioned it on the pod we did the back end of last week that it is a really interesting question. Phil's right to point out that Sunderland looked really good at home against Sheffield United playing the 4-4-2. I think Mayenda and Isidore scored and also assisted each other as well. Phil mentioned that it's probably the best I've looked at the 4-4-2, and I definitely agree with that. But again, just to reiterate what I said towards the back end of last week on the pod, I think the more I've thought about it, the more I would like that control in the middle with the three, especially early doors, and then you possibly reassess depending on how the game goes, if you've got a lead or if you lose, and however it goes. I would like to see Sunderland set up solidly. Not that they can't play solidly in a 4-4-2. We've seen that, and Sunderland do drop into a 4-4-2 out of possession even when they line up 4-3-3. But I just think that would be the smart money for Regis Le Bris. Big pitch at Wembley, big occasion. Just to have that extra man in the middle, I think would do the world of good.
Would you anticipate any other changes, Phil? Obviously, the likes of Chris Rigg, Chris Mepham had to make do with a place on the bench for the two semi-finals. I'm sure they were both bitly disappointed, but I know Reggie had spoken about that, didn't he, in terms of them taking it in the right way, although no doubt they'll have points to prove. Do you think there'll be any other wider changes, or do you think they'll stick?
I think it's harsh as it is because, I've said before on this pod that, for me, a big contender for player of the season, but I can't see Chris Mepham getting back into the team, and that's no reflection on him. I just think, Ballard was obviously the headline from those semi-finals just because, he was, in my opinion, clearly the best player on the pitch from both teams across the two legs. But I also thought Luke O'Nien was exceptional alongside him, and it was only because Ballard was so good that we didn't talk about Luke O'Nien more. Obviously, Luke O'Nien really is kind of the heartbeat of this team. He's one of its key leaders, has real experience now, both at Wembley and just generally in sort of senior football. So I can't see Ballard getting in. I mean, with Rigg, I think obviously there's the slight question mark that obviously Roberts had a bit of a calf issue through the second leg. We don't know the severity of that. If Roberts is anywhere close to being fully fit, he'll play because he's one of those players who Le Bris has counted on all season. Clearly, if for whatever reason Roberts didn't make it, then Riggs a shoe in to sort of come in on that right hand side. Because I thought, to be fair, we talked about Mundle because he was the game changer against Coventry City in extra time in that second leg. But I thought Rigg was a big part of that as well. We spoke about it before, but I think his attitude in handling that disappointment of not starting the two legs was exceptional, really, for someone so young. something that you don't really see that often, I think, in young players, and how to handle that disappointment and sort of show his maturity. So that's a really interesting one. I think the thing for Rig is he either starts or he's the first player who comes off the bench. So he is like absolutely key to Sunderland's promotion hopes, whether that be as an impact substitute or as a starter. And obviously, yeah, he showed in those 2 legs that he can make an impact. So yeah, I think most seasons from week to week, we've known what the team's going to be. Like Le Bris isn't that kind of manager who, like, he likes stability, he likes partnerships. And so, yeah, I think other than, I think fitness are the only real issues here that we're talking about. I think most of the team kind of picks itself, I think.
Do you agree with that, James, or do you think he'll make a spring another surprise, Richard?
I think he could be minded to start Chris Rigg just because of the impact he made off the bench in extra time against Coventry City. Obviously, Patrick Roberts with the calf injury, so we're still waiting to hear on that. But I just wonder if Rigg's energy might be favoured. That's not a knock on Patrick Roberts, who put in a tremendous shift over the 2 legs. But it's sort of youthful exuberance, the impact he had on the game. I wonder if that might factor in Le Bris's mind. And I think he's shown as well with the Ballard Mepham decision that he's not scared to make a big change in a big game. So I think that one at the moment could be 50-50 in the mind of the head coach. Obviously, a lot will depend on how the calf injury is. Like, I really, really love Patrick Roberts. He's one of my favourite Sunderland players over the past 3, 4, 5 years. But in an attacking sense, towards the back end of the season, he hasn't really done it, has he? Saying that his work rate's been exceptional, but it's an interesting call, that one, I think, on the right-hand side to see where Le Bris goes. But Phil's right to say as well that Roberts and Rigg, both of them are going to have big parts to play regardless of who starts.
A lot of column inches, rightly so, and back page images of Dan Ballard, Phil. But stunning performance from him over the 2 legs. Certainly justified Regis Le Bris' decision to bring him back in. Do you think there's any fear that it was such a dramatic end to the game last Tuesday that that could be Sunderland's finale almost? Is it? How difficult do you think it'll be for Regis Le Bris to get in and amongst the players this week and try and refocus them, or do you think the game itself will just lend to it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there is a definite, like, it's a really valid point to raise, particularly because I watched both of Sheffield United's semi-finals legs, and with the greatest respect, Bristol City, they became quite easy games for Sheffield United. Like, especially the second leg, they were able to manage that quite easily, and obviously played the first leg 65 minutes with an extra man. So I think there's absolutely no doubt that's a massive advantage physically for Sheffield United, particularly when you then factor in, because of the sort of the parachute payments, because of the January they were able to have, they do have a bigger squad anyway and a deeper squad. So I do think there's a definite advantage there. I think that's a really, really relevant point. I think in terms of Sunderland players, though, I do know what you mean in terms of that, can you refocus? I think, I was in there doing some stuff with the players last Friday, and it was actually really noticeable that once the adrenaline had worn off, I think one of the things that they'd all said was, we don't want to be remembered as the team who had that moment but then didn't win. We want that to be part of the story of us getting back to the Premier League. And it does feel like, rightly so, that Tuesday night was just an absolutely incredible high, and, probably scenes of more celebration than you usually get after a semi-final win because of the way it happened. But I think definitely by the end of the week, it definitely sort of come back to earth a little bit. And I think there was a real resolve that, like, let's not let that be sort of the end, if you like. Let's go on and do this last part of the job now, and almost, if you like, make that memory like extra special, I think. But for sure, like, for Sheffield United, those semi-finals were a dream to be able to manage it in that way. They'll have been absolutely ecstatic, I'm sure, when Sunderland Coventry went to extra time.
That just ties in the next point, really, James. There was a lot mentioned last week from pundits, some former players of Sunderland, many non, but also just around the level of celebrations at the final whistle. Little indication as well, I suppose, if Sunderland were to go up, then you get a whole different level of scrutiny, don't you, around clubs in terms of eyes on you. Can go a little under the radar sometimes in the Championship. But what did you make of the final whistle celebrations and some of the reaction from the pundits to it?
I thought the final whistle celebrations were absolutely phenomenal and fantastic. I loved it as a fan myself, as a journalist. I thought it was amazing. I may have let out a little shriek of my own, which is most unprofessional. I'm sure you'll agree, but
I think
context
it's the same, to be honest with you.
context was key, isn't it? Really, I mean, there's a bit of needle between Sunderland and Coventry City. The way the two games had gone, it was a second before penalties. Sunderland had been leading, and then Coventry had scored on the night to draw an aggregate. Sunderland have had a miserable time of it. Had 17-point season, 19-point seasons. 4 seasons in League One, back-to-back relegations. Become a laughingstock. Really, it's taken them a long time to rebuild. There's been ritual humiliation over the seasons until quite recently. So I think it was an outpouring of joy and emotion that was fantastic, really. And I just sort of think if you can't enjoy that, then what is football all about? It was such a pure moment, and I don't think anybody was forgetting that we've got Sheffield United to play at Wembley. Like we know the job's not done. I don't think anybody's being complacent, but it was just such a wonderful moment. The context of it, the timing of it, that it was just sheer unbridled joy. And I don't think anybody should be begrudged for getting a little bit carried away. I mean, the pitch invasion wasn't great. Luckily, it was sorted out pretty quickly. There was an incident with Frank Lampard and a phone and a Coventry player and a Sunderland fan as well. There'll likely be a fine. The FA will probably look into that. There'll be a couple of bans as well, rightly so. But I just think generally the celebrations we saw between the players and the fans were absolutely fantastic. And I think in a wider point as well, that sort of atmosphere, that build-up around the game, that colour, the passion, the noise, it's such a good, unique selling point for this football club. It's something that not a lot of other football clubs have, I would suggest, to the magnitude of Sunderland, that passion. And I think it really helps boost Sunderland's profile in the long term. And I think it's a good thing. I can't really understand. I mean, I know fans of rival clubs will always have a go at other clubs for over-celebrating this, but for me, it was just such a fantastic moment after everything we've had to endure that, yeah, celebrate until your heart's content, I say.
And Frank Lampard was obviously frustrated, but I suppose he was relatively gracious in defeat afterwards, and he played down the pitch invasion, didn't he? Which was, I suppose, fair play to him. Some managers might have made a bit more of it post-match, but yeah, we'll see what the other ramifications of that are. Just to add on Regis Le Bris, Phil, in terms of the job he's done overall this season, but also that run into the end of the season obviously was poor after they'd secured that 4th place. To then manage to turn it around in the space of a week or so, and with that dramatic end, it's been quite a job from him, hasn't it, this season?
Yeah, I mean, the 2 legs were total vindication for his approach, really, in the sort of last month of the season, for someone to be able to, get to that point in extra time where they had pretty much their best team out, to take control of the game and to have the legs and the energy to do that. I think justified his approach, and I think just speaking about what we before about the celebrations, as well as like the other thing to remember is, we're talking about pundits having their say on Sunderland and stuff. Everyone had written Sunderland off ahead of those 2 semi-finals. Everyone assumed that Coventry were the form team. They were going to sort of win the game, especially that first leg. Sunderland had been pretty roundly written off. And the way they managed that first leg was exceptional. And I've got no doubt in my mind that fed into kind of the celebrations after as well. So I think that was part of it, that the players had proved people wrong. And I think they were entitled to kind of enjoy that. In terms of Le Bris, I think whatever happens on Saturday, he's done an excellent job this season. I think obviously, you want to go and finish the job. But I think the way he managed those 2 legs has been just kind of summed up mainly what he's done all season. He's been pragmatic when he's needed to be. He's been super calm. His emotions never really change. He doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low, which I think is a really important skill for some manager, because obviously, and we're guilty of it as well, the noise can be pretty deafening at times, especially in some of the tougher periods. And just so focused, really takes away a lot of the pressure from the players. And I think he's done it. I think those 2 legs were massive, really, because if Sunderland had lost after those games, given the way that the season ended, I think it would have felt like a real damn squib. Whereas I think what the players did over those 2 legs was a reminder to everyone, really, about the spirit that they've built, how resilient they've been over the course of the season, and how much quality they've got as well. Because as I say, most people expected Coventry to go and win those games. So I think it was just a reminder of the season that he's produced, really. He's proven himself to be an absolutely massive asset, I think, for the football club, not just over those 2 legs, but over the course of the season as a whole.
Just on the celebration piece again as well, Rich, it's like Sunderland players were criticised away at Coventry as well at the end of the game, just for going up to the away end and sort of paying thanks to the thousands of people that had come down. So unfortunately, I think sometimes like the knives are out and it doesn't really matter what you do. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. But, I thought particularly in the first leg, Sunderland players were really measured. And then, the second leg, it's probably the best stadium of light moment there's ever been. So you can't really criticise them for getting carried away.
Yeah, for sure. We were all outside the stadium pre-match for when the team coach arrived, and that felt like quite a significant moment and probably something a little bit different. Tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't feel like that's happened too many times.
Yeah, it was.
I haven't seen anything like that.
No, the buzz around the place was absolutely incredible. So special. It was, obviously the Ballard moment was amazing, but being around the ground in the sort of hour before kickoff is something that will really stick with me, to be honest. Just the buzz, the anticipation in the air, like the unity as well off the back of that first leg. I think fans there'd been a lot said in the final weeks of the season. I can understand why, because some of the performances were pretty dire. But I think the way that people rallied round after that first leg and sort of connected with the team again was just amazing. And yeah, those are scenes that'll stay with you, won't they? It was just absolutely fantastic. I think, not just from a football club perspective, but from a city perspective, like the whole place was just buzzing all day. It was really, really magic. And hopefully that's something that can endure as well. Like, hopefully we can take some of that energy like into next season, whether it's in the Premier League, whether it's in the Championship, because I do think that the fans got Sunderland over the line on Tuesday night, because there were times when that performance was shaky. And I do think the way that even in the difficult moments, the fans really stuck with it. I thought that was massive to Sunderland being able to dig in. Hopefully like that game, there's a little bit of a legacy from that in terms of like what you can do to the Stadium of Light. Really, really, really special stuff. Like I think you're right to point that out, because it's got a bit lost, hasn't it? Because of the Ballard header, I think, a little bit, understandably. But that was something really, really sort of special to be part of, and even in just a little way.
I think you have to credit Sunderland, A Love Supreme, and Roker Report, and This Is Wayside as well for sorting that out. Because when those plans initially dropped, you sort of have that little bit of fear, don't you? Is that, is this going to be a bit of a damp squib? Are we doing the right thing here? Is it going to look good? Because all of those things go through your mind. But having been around the side of the Aquatic Centre when the team coach pulled in, it was insane. I've never seen anything like it. Dan Neil, after the game, was obviously buzzing in general, but he said that really set the tone for them. That really made them understand how much it meant, because they all said they'd never experienced things like that before. Chris Riggs, 17. Can you imagine what he was thinking on that bus coming in? It. Eliza Mayendes, what just turned 20. It's that sort of stuff leaves a mark, and it shows the power of fans as well.
For sure. I was trying to think what I was doing. I was 17, but it certainly wasn't that. And I guess also the club will hopefully, they definitely will use that moving forward, and then it'll help attract not just players, but all sorts of, sponsors, investment, as and when they need a new manager in many years' time. All those kind of things can help sell the club, can't they? That huge show of support from the fan base.
Definitely. And I think it is also definitely a reminder of the size of the club. And I know that sounds strange to say, because you've got 40,000 fans there like every week, which is just incredible loyalty. And especially through the League One years, the way that you're still getting such insane numbers home and away was obviously such a reminder of how big the club is. But I think that, it was absolutely a reminder of the potential of this place. I think, that was a Championship playoff semi-final, and the atmosphere and the scenes there will have topped what you see at 90% of top tier clubs around the world. And I think it was a little bit of a reminder of this is a Premier League club in waiting, and also that when you get there, you've got the capacity to do something really special over time. So I think that's a thing. I think obviously even away from the Ballard header, I think there's so much from that night that you can take away. And it was weird, because in some ways it almost felt like the atmosphere was that it was like you could almost sense the players, do you go for it? Because it was so feverish, wasn't it? It was so amazing. Yeah. But then they were trying to be sort of manage the game as well, because they've got a 1-goal lead. But I do, as I said before, I do really think, especially after Coventry's goal and going into extra time when Sunderland hadn't played that well, I do think the fans were the difference, really. As you say, I think that whole night and the whole world seeing those scenes, there's 100% going to be players who signed for Sunderland, and in their first interview they mentioned that they've seen clips on TikTok of Dan Ballard and stuff like that. 100%. We saw it with Netflix, and a moment like that is definitely going to leave a legacy. 100%.
And fans will be enjoying their night in London, Trafalgar Square Friday. Hopefully they'll be there again Saturday night, but we'll wait and see on that front. Just moving it forward then to the actual final itself. Just start with you, James. Sheffield United favourites heading into the game?
I think they have to be, coming down from the Premier League last season. They've got that parachute money. I think their squad is a little bit of an embarrassment of riches when it comes to the Championship. Just the attacking options they've got, I think, are really, really impressive. That's not to say that Sunderland can't beat Sheffield United at Wembley and go to the Premier League, because I truly believe they can. I do think it is slightly advantage Sheffield United, but so much depends on how much you want it on the day, really, and which Sunderland turns up. I think it will be a cagey game. I think they'll both be sort of reticent to sort of come out and attack the game initially, because it'll be such a tense affair. But I do think it is advantage Sheffield United. But I think that suits Sunderland. That suits our underdog status. I think the fans will buy into that. I think the players will buy into that. Sunderland have looked really good on the break. I think the onus might be on Sheffield United to sort of get on the front foot. But although I have Sheffield United as slight favourites just because of the resource, there is no reason why Sunderland cannot win this game. And it is by no means David and Goliath either, because Sunderland are also a big club and Sunderland also have some very, very good players. I just suspect Sheffield United might have a few more of those better players, and that's what worries me.
Yeah, Sheffield United's playoff record's pretty dismal, but all records come to an end at some point. How do you see things, Phil, heading into Saturday's 3 o'clock final? Or 3:01, sorry, the EFL have confirmed today.
Yeah, I think that I think for all those mentions that James has just mentioned, I think Sheffield United have to go off as favourites, and I think that it was kind of noticeable to me as well watching the Bristol City, the two legs, as I mentioned earlier. The first leg, obviously, actually when Bristol City went down to 10 men, Sheffield United didn't really take advantage for another half an hour, 35 minutes. It wasn't until Chris Wilder brought Callum O'Hare and Tom Davies on that they really sort of kicked on again. And that just underlines that, I think, because they're two players who walk into pretty much any other team in the Championship. And then, you realise they've won 6-0 over 2 legs, and Ben Barrett and Diaz hasn't even been in the squad. And that's the kind of the depth that we're talking about. So I think that they rightly go off as favourites. But at the same time, we have seen 2 games between these two teams this season, and there was absolutely nothing in it. On the evidence of those 2 games, there is absolutely no reason why Sunderland can't win a one-off fixture. We know that they've got the organisation to do it. We know that they've got the individual quality to do it. So I'm going in, I would say, with slightly managed expectations because of the reasons that we've outlined, but at the same time, certainly not pessimistic, because I think, on the only team this season that I have genuinely felt was ahead of Sunderland in a sort of one-off capacity is Leeds United. I think the 2 games between the 2 teams this season, Leeds were comfortably the better. I haven't for a minute felt that anybody else was considerably superior to Sunderland. And so, yeah, go wary, I think. Definitely feeling that Sheffield United have the edge, but definitely totally with the conviction, the belief that Sunderland are capable of winning the game. They 100% are.
I mean, with the greatest of respect to Sheffield United and Chris Wilder as well, they've done fantastically well to get as many points as they have. And in different seasons, that would have seen you promoted automatically. But when I've watched them, admittedly, I haven't watched them for the whole season, all of the games, every minute, but they haven't really clicked for me under Chris Wilder in terms of where they should be and how well they should be playing for the personnel they've got under Chris Wilder. Now, the caveat to that is that they don't lose many games. They're hard to beat, and they obviously win a lot of games as well. So it is hard to criticise. But I just feel from watching them that they haven't really clicked and haven't played to their full potential. And that's what gives me a little bit of hope coming into the final, actually, that, Sunderland in those last sort of 5 games by no means set the world alight. But when we do turn it on, I think we play some really, really, really good counter-attacking football.
Certainly. We're recording this on Monday at lunchtime, depending on when you listen or watch to this. Chris Wilder's due to give his press conference on Tuesday, and Regis Le Bris a little bit later in the week for Sunderland. So we'll wait and see what the exact team and injury news is from both of those, although I suspect, regardless of what the actual injury news, if there is any, managers will be pretty coy, I would imagine, ahead of the final. So we'll see. Just to add on the fans, James, at Trafalgar on Friday night, it was a privilege to be at the stadium like last Tuesday, and certainly in recent seasons at Trafalgar Square and Wembley, obviously with Sunderland's checker trade Pizza Cup. What was it? Wasn't Checker
Papa
Trail,
John's.
Papa John's, beg your pardon, get the sponsors wrong. Papa John's, and then obviously the promotion game. 35,000 heading down there this weekend, plus whichever sort of London-based Sunderland fans as well. It's going to be a real treat, isn't it? Friday night into Saturday before the game kicks off, at least.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I missed the last one because I was in Wales for a funeral, the Wickham one. So I travelled on the day of the game, so I missed like Covent Garden and Trafalgar Square. So I'm really, really looking forward to being in and amongst that and covering it. And if any Sunderland fans would like a psychological boost ahead of the game, Sunderland will be housed in the West Stand at Wembley. They've never lost when they've been housed in the West Stand. And both FA Cup semi-finals, the final and the Carabao Cup final, the fans of those clubs have been housed in the West Stand. So that's, if you're superstitious, something maybe that will give you a little bit of comfort. I suspect it doesn't mean much, but if, like me, you're looking for things to help you sleep at night, then that's certainly one of them.
We'll be clinging on to that in the coming days.
So does that mean the Sunderland fans are in the same end as the Wickham one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good news. Yeah, that is good.
We were amongst it, weren't we? We were that end in the press box.
Because the previous two, we were in the wrong end in the press box, weren't we, for the Sunderland fans, which was particularly the Charlton one was not a happy experience for any of us.
And
you've cheered me up. So that's something.
They were West End. They were West End in 1937 and 1973, which is good news. The rest have been East. So
even different stadium. We'll stick with that. Yeah.
I'm probably going to get somebody who's going to inbox me and say you're wrong, but I'm pretty certain that that's correct.
Just in terms of the battle, Phil, between Chris Wilder and Regis Le Bris, do you think there'll be much this week in terms of the two managers, or just for all out respect between the pair of them? Do you think? I can't imagine there'll be too many jibes between the pair of them.
No, I don't think so, and I think actually that it's not really two clubs who have any kind of particular sort of beef, is it, over the years? I don't foresee it being that kind of final. I think that they're two. It was interesting what James said about Sheffield United, and it doesn't always look as exciting. I think what both these managers share, what they've done this season, is a really solid defensive structure. I don't see an absolute classic for the neutral, to be honest. I think it's two teams that prioritise that organisation first and foremost and let the individual quality then do its bit. And when you add the tension and the stakes in this game, it's hard to imagine it sort of flowing from end to end, I think. But I don't think you're ever going to get that kind of psychological stuff from Regis Le Bris. I just don't think he goes in for it, really. It'll be the same press conference on Thursday that it always is. It'll be relatively short. It'll be quite to the point. Very, very measured. And I think that's his big strength, really.
Connection.
Yeah, he doesn't really change from week to week, and I think that's his great strength. I think he gives the players stability from that. It's going to be an interesting one. I know Chris Wilder can sometimes use the media a little bit more, but I don't really think it's going to be that kind of matchup, to be honest. I suppose you never know, do you? That Wembley can do strange things to people and the pressure of it. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yes, it will. Good stuff. I think that's most things covered. Unless there's anything either of you are desperate to get off your chest ahead of the big final.
I just hope, having watched the FA Cup final, and I was delighted for Crystal Palace and their fans, by the way. But I mean, that Dean Henderson shout was an absolute howler, wasn't it? And I hope nothing like that happens, because how VAR hasn't picked that up, and obviously VAR's going to be in action at Wembley for the Championship playoff final. Only the second game VAR's been in action for a Sunderland game. The first one was the Wickham final, in which it wasn't used at all, I don't think. So I'm hoping that's not decisive, because I'd like a VAR-free game.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually, because obviously Sunderland in the Championship don't use VR or the semi-automated offside decision technology. So yeah, there'll be a couple of things to keep an eye on for all of us, including us, on Saturday as well. So yeah, hopefully the best team, that Sunderland, wins on Saturday. Head to the Sunderland Echo's website throughout the week for the latest Sunderland news and all the build-up. Grab a copy of the paper each day as well. There'll be plenty in there ahead of Saturday. The team will be down in London all weekend and in Trafalgar Square, bringing you the very best coverage from hopefully a very successful weekend. Thanks both. Hope you can get some sleep before the weekend.
We'll try.
Cheers all. See you next time.